Good morning, family. Listen, I got a question. I want to know something. I want you all to tell me, right? How much money does God need? How much money does God need to deliver you? How much money does God need to interpret your dreams? How much money does God need to share a word of knowledge with you, for you to know his word? How much money does God need? I want to know that. And I want you to teach me. Comment in the comment section. Share. How much money does God need? You see, because when I look back at the prophet Isaiah, when God sent Isaiah to Hezekiah to tell Hezekiah to get his house in order, I can't recall, there were no fees that Hezekiah had to give God to be sent. Hezekiah didn't choose to be sent. God directed him. He was obedient. When he got to Hezekiah, I can't recall him telling Hezekiah what the fee was going to be for him to receive that message. Hezekiah then, when he left and gave the message, Hezekiah then, who had his own mind, could reach to God for himself. Even though the prophet had already came, Hezekiah prayed to God, and he reminded God of the things he had done, of his obedience, because he wasn't ready to go back yet. You see, God deals with each of us individually. Even though he had already sent that prophet that he chose, and I don't know the fee, I can't find the fee that was paid, but Hezekiah prayed, and God then now, God could have spoke directly to him, but Hezekiah, who humbled himself and prayed to God, God has heard his prayers immediately when he prayed, and God chose to send the prophet Isaiah back to Hezekiah to let him know his prayer was answered and God was going to grant him his request by giving him 15 more years. And I still can't not find where God charged the prophet Isaiah a fee and God needed money. I still do not see where the prophet Isaiah needed money from Hezekiah. I did not see where God needed money from where prophet Isaiah needed money when he went back to tell him that his prayers were answered. God were giving him 15 more years. Hezekiah did not have to pay prophet Isaiah. When Pharaoh had a dream and he could not interpret that dream, he was reminded by his cupbearer that there was a man in prison who interpreted their dream. Now, when Joseph was operating in his gift that was freely given, because it was taking him to his purpose, right? He had to endure long suffering, which is one of the fruits of the Spirit, because God was growing him up through all of that pain. It wasn't easy being lied on, being rejected. He had to endure that. He didn't know it was necessary, but he never pimped out his gift. You understand? So when Pharaoh was reminded by his cupbearer that there was a man in prison that interpreted our dreams, he sent for Joseph. And when he sent for Joseph, I cannot find where Joseph charged him a fee to come. He sent for Joseph. When Joseph was brought to him, Joseph interpreted his dream. When Joseph heard his dream, I cannot recall where Joseph charged a fee for the dream. I cannot recall that. And so I want to know, how much money does God need for those who he has chosen and appointed to operate in their gifts? I need to know that. How much money does God need for you to go out into the world and do what Matthew 10:8 says? Heal the sick, raise the dead. Freely you have received and freely you give. I remember there was a pastor, my aunt, before she left this earth, She had come under attack of the spirit of infirmity. Doctors couldn't know what was going on. It was spiritual. After the doctors couldn't come up and report, my aunt was a praying woman and she knew God. And she raised her children up in God the best she knew how. And so when she was weak and her body was shutting down on her, she now had to fall back on the seed that she had brought in the earth, and they did an amazing job. And we came together and we fasted and we prayed and we said, if they can't figure it out, then send her back home, because the doctors couldn't figure it out. There was a pastor who said that he would come and pray if the money was right, right? If the money was right. Now, this was not shared with me until after that occurred. And so,
That's your puppy over there.
yes,
He watching.
everything. This was not shared with me until after. And we discussed that. We saw how the power of God worked. That pastor who took money and went and prayed for my aunt on her sick bed, he promised that she would be well after a certain amount of days, right? I think 7 days or something after the day he prayed for her. I didn't know that. The very next day was my third day of fasting. And the Lord gave me a word for my aunt. And I worked that whole day. My family waited. I wasn't able to make it there until that night. And I went in and I spoke everything the Lord said to me over my aunt. And I spoke to the body. There was no fee that she had to pay. The very next morning, I went home that night. The very next morning, I was about to get up, go to work. I get up early. The Lord put in my spirit, go and see your aunt. So everything I had on my schedule for work, I had to cancel it. And I went and I drove down to see my aunt. The very next day, that was the next day, my aunt was sitting straight up in her bed, eating and talking. Prior to that, she wasn't able to. My family will tell you this testimony. And we did not pay a dime for that overnight miracle that took place before our eyes. But the false prophet had said, I think 7 days she would have been better. You see? After 7 days, she had to wait to 7 days for a healing, right? But the next day, when we came together in agreement, my aunt was sitting, eating, drinking, the esophagus, everything was working fine, and she was able to talk again. And as soon as I walked in, she said, oh, I sure thank God. That's a miracle. You understand me? Life is spiritual, and we who say we are of God, we should have testimonies to prove the power of God. And as long as we are in this earth, the power of God will work through our life. I have suffered under many doctors for many years with the severity of endometriosis. Didn't even know it was endometriosis. They used me as a guinea pig since I was a 15-year-old child. Medication after medication. Every month, several days, I'm laying on the floor, sweating 3 days in a row, in pain, severe pain, as if I was giving birth. It wasn't until I got into my later adulthood to where I said, I ain't taking the medicine no more. I ain't doing it no more. I said, I'd rather die, because this is not how I should live. And I said, if God, if you are real, how could you let me suffer like this? I was in my mother's house, in my room at her house at that time, on the floor, so yelling these things out. And my mama was coming and said, don't say that. And I said, I'm saying it. How is there a God and I got to suffer? I challenge God. Not from a place of disobedience, but from a place of, why do I have to suffer with this thing that I don't understand? How could I have to be in so much pain? And I said, I'm not taking the medicine no more. If you be God, then you shall heal me. Because you did it for the woman with the issue of blood. And all she did was believe. And don't you know that God began to take away some of that pain? But he also led me to Leviticus, Deuteronomy, the unclean and the clean, unclean foods. I had to study that. That was heavy in my heart. And as I study and as I learn, I had to research, what is this divided cuff and this and chew the cud and not the cud? I didn't understand it. But I studied because I prayed for understanding. And it was in my spirit And as I learned of unclean foods, I stopped eating them just like that. I did it just like that as I learned, because I didn't know. See, it is through lack of knowledge my people are destroyed. And all that get knowledge. And after I did that, when I got off of the unclean foods, don't you know the issues that I would have month after month, all that pain, it started to go away. And I was like, okay, I had to do something. Faith without works is dead. Then I wanted to know, well, what something is got to be inside of me. I never was diagnosed with endometriosis yet. Until I went and I sought after someone to test me. It was a doctor that tested me and took pictures of my insides. They went into my navel with what I forgot what they call it. They call it laparoscopic surgery, but a little camera, and I have pictures which are a part of my testimony where you can see these clots of lesion on the inside of me that they call endometriosis. And he showed me and he explained them. He said, medical science says there's no cure. He said, but now you do have endometriosis. He said, and it's very painful. And the only thing I can suggest is you can have a hysterectomy. Or maybe you can try getting pregnant. I said, well, do you see a ring on this finger? I said, I'm a generational curse breaker, so I ain't about to get pregnant just to get rid of that, and you don't know if it's going to work. And I said, I'm not about to have a hysterectomy. Nothing is being taken off of my body. I said, God has already healed me. I just needed to know what was on the inside of me. And he had these steroid that he wanted to put me on. And I refused it. I said, my pain had already subsided. But I wanted to know there had to be some type of answer of what was it. And that was the medical science answer. It was endometriosis. All those years, undiagnosed. And I am a healthy woman. Every organ I've been born with on my body, born of a woman, everything natural on my body. There's never been anything unnatural in my body. I've never taken anything unnatural to lose weight, to gain weight, But for years, they've medicated me and put me on a shot. I used to take this shot. That made me gain weight. I took myself off of all of that stuff. God is a healer. I'm not talking it because I just talk. I'm talking what I know and what I live. And if he did it for me, he can do it for you. Sometimes there is something that we just don't know what we are doing. And there are things in this earth that can heal everything on these bodies. These bodies are smart bodies. Like they say, the smartphones and the smart watches and all that stuff. The bodies are a smart watch, a smart body. How can you cut yourself? You can cut your skin and it can be split open. And if you put the right ointments and disinfectant on that thing and just let air hit it and keep it clean, day after day, you're going to see that thing begin to restore itself, begin to close up, begin to heal. That's God. That's God. As long as the spirit is in this flesh and there's life in the spirit. That's why my aunt was able to be revived, laying in a bed, helpless. All that night, her esophagus wasn't working. But we touched that body and command healing. She was just squeezing my hand the whole time that we were praying. She couldn't talk. She was saying, and the little tears that she had were rolling down her eye. That's why the next day she was able to get up and talk and eat, sit up in the bed and be restored and say, oh, I sure thank God. That's why. Why? Because life is in the spirit. And I know where she at. She ain't lost because we don't die. We leave this flesh behind. There is life on the other side. And there are births that happen on the other side. That's why he told Jeremiah, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. Jeremiah's spirit was birthed from above. We have spiritual mothers and fathers, not the earthly people. You're never going to hear me call nobody in this earth my spiritual mother. God is my father. I learned more about my spiritual mother, how my spirit was birthed on the other side. He impregnates the women above, who still, everything is similar. But life is spiritual. There is life after death. Jesus said, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. There is a beautiful place on the other side. Why do you think you ever seen some people who spirit have left and gone back? And then God sent their spirit back to the body and they said, oh, when they realized they back in the earth, it's like, they didn't want to come back. They said it was so beautiful. There'd be no more evil. The wheat will be separated from the tare. There'd be no more manipulation, all of this frustration. But see, right now, We got to endure. We got to endure to the end. So you got to stay strong. You're going to see the false prophets rise. You're going to see them manipulating the weak baby in Christians, the ones who gullible. You're going to see them pulling them away. And they're going to see them sucking the life and joy out of people. Religion suck the life and joy out of people. You're being choked out of your natural life. There is fun and joy in this life to have. You don't have to live restricted. But you can live holy and still have fun. You can still have clean fun. I'm a living witness. When you see me jumping around here, dancing and shouting, I know I'm going on subject a little bit. It don't make me want to go to the club. I was never a clubbing person. Ask anybody who went to college with me. I think they took me one time. It was dark in there. I was sitting to the bar, and then this man, I was just sitting there uncomfortable. And the man come and touch me, asking me, do you want me to buy him a drink? Do I want him to buy me a drink? I said, no. I got up and I left. I told him, let's go. They said, go, we just got here. I went in the road, got in the middle road on the yellow line. It was a dark night, and I walked all the way back to my dorm. I asked God to cover me. I've never been a club person. When I hear music and you hear me dancing to Gladys Knight and all of that, Love Over Boy, I love this. A beautiful song. If I get married, it's going to be in my married house too. You see me dancing till it's single, you will see me dancing married. That don't make me want to go to no club. You could be at home and dance and have joy. Stop letting religion suck the life and the joy out of your spirit. But back to the main thing that I want to talk about. I want answers. I want to know, how much money does God need to deliver you? I want to know, how much money does God need to send a prophet to teach you something? I want to know, how much money does God need to pour prosperity into your life? He poured it into Joseph's life after long suffering. Joseph didn't pay nobody to break the spirit of poverty off of his life, because you can't do it. He didn't pay nobody to teach him how to break poverty off of his life. He lived a real, normal life. And whatever he put his hands to, it was good. It prospered. It prospered. You see? So I want you to answer the question for me. And when you answer the question, how much money does God need to deliver us, to heal us, to teach us, to help us overcome witchcraft? Show me in the Word. I want to know how much money He needs. And when you answer that, then I want you to look at those who represent themselves in the earth as mouthpieces of God. And I want you to ask yourself, how much money do they need? Have a blessed day.